Welcome back. It's time for Press Review, and joining me for that is Ruth Ambogo. Jeez, is that the right name? Because she's been giving me grief for a certain incident at the beginning of the year. So Ruth Ambogo is a youth policy advisor, and Bashir Suleiman is a lawyer. They're joining us for Press Review just to take a look at what's making headlines, see how the Kenyan press has prioritized everything, and judge whether it is justified or not. Welcome to the show, lady and gent.
Thank you.
Now, the biggest story, obviously, is the coronavirus taking a new twist, where we are being told, we were told yesterday that 239 passengers aboard a South China airline landed in the country and were allowed to leave and, of course, do what is being termed as self-quarantine. The concern, obviously, amongst everyone, and as Member of Parliament raised yesterday, was that these people might have been carrying said virus and they might infect people, and we cannot entrust them with the responsibility of quarantining themselves, if that's a word, quarantining. Now, Suleiman, when you look at the papers today, the headlines tell it all. The Standard is saying enemies of the people. Now, 4 cabinet secretaries are facing serious credibility questions after allowing an airline to fly in 239 passengers from China, the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, risking the lives of 48 million Kenyans. And the spread is between page 4 and 5, as you can see right there on your screen. The Daily Nation is taking a different approach. They're giving us the numbers on the top page, and they're telling us a virus, why Kenya is dancing with death. Now, going against the grain, we outrage over government decision to allow flights from China, even as more countries choose to err on the side of caution by warning themselves and to lock out the fast-spreading epidemic that has claimed 2,810 lives, with 82,358 infected already. And they go further to break it down. On one side, they're telling us the total cases, the reported deaths, and then obviously these are the ones that are on record. There's some areas where they're still looking for patient zero. There's some countries that are still not being very forthcoming with the numbers. But of course, the highest is China, then South Korea. We have followed by Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Macau, Philippines. In Europe, we have Italy, Germany, France, UK, and Spain. Middle East has Iran with the highest number, even ministers being brought down by this particular illness. Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, Oman, Lebanon are also affected. Then down we have America. In the Americas, United States, Canada, Brazil has 1 patient. Then we have Africa with 1 each in Egypt and Algeria. And finally, Oceania has Australia that has recorded 23 cases, and obviously no deaths as yet. But the deaths are centered in Middle East, Europe, and Asia. So a very thorough breakdown of all those numbers. Now, my guests, I'm curious about what you feel about this new development with the coronavirus. Are we, as the nation puts it, dancing with death? Start with you, Suleiman.
I think, firstly, on the part of the Standard, true to its mantra as a bold newspaper, such a headline that specific persons are sort of quote-unquote enemies of the people, in the event we end up having this virus that might affect the 45 million lives of Kenyans, is good journalism on its part. It's clear that all Kenyans are concerned. We saw the cries on social media. Kenyans are thinking, what will happen in the event, God forbid, this virus strikes? This is a virus that does not spare any political superior or any person with money or anything.
Yes.
We have seen cases of the vice president in charge of women affairs of Iran, who has been quarantined as we speak, over infectious issues related to the coronavirus. Again, on the other hand, the head of parliament of Iran has equally been affected. Then again, the deputy health minister, Haraji, that's the Iranian minister again, has equally been affected. So, as a country, we're asking ourselves, are we really prepared? So, in the event, God forbid, anything happens, these specific 4 cabinet secretaries, or the lives of Kenyans, in the event anything bad happens. As a country, I think we're asking ourselves the big question, in the event it strikes, are we prepared?
Right.
Is it a big problem that can't we just suspend our flights to and from China in general? Is it a big deal? Why can't we follow other nations that have done the same? The other day, the Dubai International Airport has suspended all flights to and from Iran. And these are countries that ordinarily have lots and lots of flights per day. So the lives of Kenyans should come first compared to any other thing. And let me add this. We have about 90 Kenyans who are in Wuhan. And the government of Kenya is telling us that Wuhan is on lockdown. But South Africa has established that about 190 of its citizens who are in Wuhan state ought to be evacuated. And that's what exactly that government is doing. The same has been done by India. India has gotten back its 119 citizens who are in Wuhan. So I think as Kenyans, we should be concerned of Kenyans who are here and the ones who are now sort of locked up in Wuhan.
Basically trapped in that country, but then would you say it's better to have them there and be exposed to the facilities that can handle this rather than coming home? You
see, I think my view is we need to have them back, but before we have them back, we need to subject them to requisite medical checkups.
Yes.
Since we are doing the same to the foreigners, why can't we do the same to our own? And in the event that we find them as health proper to come back to our land, we can do the same. In the event there's any issue, they can be quarantined for 14 days.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's quite scary that you would expect people to actually take this upon themselves, to seclude themselves. And yet they have families, they have homes, they have businesses and just lives outside of the airport. I mean, there's a reason they came to Kenya. They have things to do. So, I mean, while it's noble that you'd expect them to be able to quarantine themselves, I think it's a bit far. You're pushing it with our hopes and optimism in terms of that. What do you feel?
First of all, I have just been reading, and I think yesterday I was following the news, and something that came out was that Omamo's defense as to why this flight was allowed in was that it is in the best interests of the country. Which interests are we protecting here? Anytime the statement, the best interests of the country, has been mentioned anywhere, it is usually in line with two or more fundamental aspects. Number one, in the interest of public safety, and number two, in the interest of public health. So what is it that we are trying to protect? What interests are we trying to protect by allowing in 239 Chinese, coming into the country? And I agree with him that other countries have taken more stringent measures. Countries that, that are sometimes even very, do not necessarily lie in the line of risk in terms of infections that might occur. But they've taken very stringent measures. As we speak right now, mothers are worried about what to do with their kids, especially mothers who live in estates that that tend to host a lot of Chinese. Yesterday in a WhatsApp conversation, WhatsApp group, there was a group of young women who were speaking and saying, what are we supposed to do with our families, especially those who live around, estates around Mombasa Road and beyond, where Chinese, a lot of Chinese live in such estates. They were asking themselves, should we withdraw our children from schools? Should we lock up our kids in the houses? Who is to monitor this self-quarantine? We do not even have equipment. And I know she was talking about the fact that, these people have been screened at the airport. We all know, we've been given public information, that the virus takes about 14 days before it begins to manifest symptoms. We are talking about a virus that reinfects people who have already been discharged from hospitals. They fall sick again after having been declared free of the virus. Right. So how do you expect these people? What are the measures that have been put in place to ensure that this person, the moment they land into the country, first and foremost, they separate themselves from their families? Where are they supposed to go? So I think we really need to be serious as a country, and this is not something to joke about. This is not something to smile about. This is something that is being taken seriously by literally almost all countries as we speak. I mean, the other day when I traveled out of the country, and we went to the neighboring country, Tanzania, and you could see some of the measures they had put in place. They were ensuring that you have to wash your hands before you cross the border. But when you're coming back to Kenya, there are literally no measures whatsoever. In fact, we were wondering, my friends and I were wondering, so does it mean that we do not care what we bring into the country? That Tanzania is much more careful about what crosses over at their border as opposed to Kenya. Do we value the lives of our citizens? And I would want to agree with some of the members of parliament when they were bringing up the concern that, has our country's sovereignty been handed over to the Chinese, to the extent that, Kenya could easily become a dumping site for Chinese patients who are actually having coronavirus. And we would not even...
wild conjecture.
Let me tell you, at this point, there's nothing like wild or unwild or reserved comment, because if you are allowing seen 239 people without even having proper medical equipment in place. I see that an interministerial committee has been put in place. And there's no mention of medical experts on board. We are talking about persons from the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, people who have zero clue about how to handle this virus. We do not even have masks in the country. There's a shortage of masks in the country. If it were to ever happen that a case of coronavirus has been detected, and now I hear there are rumors of, I think, 1 or 2 incidences. We are not really sure of, the truthfulness of the rumors. But what would we do as a people?
And now, at this point, obviously, it might be important to note that while the epicenter is China, with the spread and with how many people travel between China and other countries in the world, we're not just talking about Chinese people. Anyone traveling into the country should be screened. There's China, there's South Korea, there's Japan, there's Hong Kong. It could be anyone, and even people of African descent who have work in China or interact with that country frequently could be people that could possibly be infected. So it's not an issue about people of Chinese origin. It could be anyone just coming from the various regions that are affected. Joining the conversation is Gabriel Muthuma. Welcome, a governance expert. And I'd like your take on how the newspapers are covering this. The nation has chosen to deal with the statistics. They're telling about the number of cases, the deaths, and the countries that have been affected so far. And they're breaking it down to the number of deaths and the cases, and obviously the deaths are much less than the number of deaths that have been reported, but China still remains at the top with 78,598 and 2,749 unfortunate deaths. What do you make of this?
Well, I think I would look at this in 2 ways. One is the kind of caution that these other countries have taken. This is the first thing. Right. And the kind of caution that they've taken, to me, it's not them being defensive. No, it's just being cautious. Cautious, yes. And the reason why I believe they've done this, if you look at what Japan has done just the other day, I think it was yesterday, they closed all schools. It's not being defensive, it's just being cautious. And I think they understand, because they've dealt with certain pandemics, I think there was a time, a nuclear something, which... so these are people who have actually known how to deal with emergencies and also how to deal with, and how to be cautious. I think we are using the term defensive, and I think that's what the right term to use. It is good to be cautious. All nations that I mean, Italy, America, all nations, if you go, they've taken certain measures that are bended towards caution. If you look at what Saudi Arabia has done, they've actually suspended visas for pilgrimage. Again, it's not about defensive, just being cautious. So that is the first.
Big deal.
Of course, it's a big deal. It is
yearly, and thousands of people. Millions, actually.
Of course, not to be confused. It is a serious issue that has received global and universal attention. So I think in our country, when other people are being cautious, we also need to understand what are cautionary measures. What are we doing? Yes, we can have a plane land from China with 280-something passengers. Question is, what is our precaution measures? What have we put in place? That is number one. Number two, I would believe most of this country, the measures they've taken, it is also because they have what you'd call a more extended emergency response. Now, that is why you would see we are more frightened than anything else. We do not have the capacity. And it's not me saying, it's the professional saying, and even the president himself pronounced those words, that Kenya is not ready. We cannot handle such an emergency response. So when you're talking about numbers like a place in Italy, these are people with extended medical services. So when you allow people to come in, our system actually cannot follow up to where all these people stay. We do not. We do not have a way to find out. Okay.
To have them.
Yes, even if we are talking about self-quarantine, we have to look at the facet of quarantining itself. How does it happen? It is people who land, they are taken to a facility and they are quarantined. That is what, CDC and WHO, I think they've rendered that narrative. Where you are taken for the incubation period of 14 days, when it's over, then I think you can be allowed to mix with the common population. But to just say, you know, go and self-quarantine.
Think of the journey an individual will take. Maybe they'll take a cab.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe share a cab with someone.
Exactly.
Yes.
Or take a matatu. Worst case scenario, intermingle with people in there. Then they would go
to the office.
Go pass by a supermarket.
Exactly.
Buy something,
And even their
restaurant.
living arrangement.
Yeah.
They'll come and find healthy people
live in
and they'll
estates
shake.
that are
Yes.
crowded.
They'll shake hands, they'll hug, they'll kiss, and before you know, these other people have also traveled. They've gone to other places. You know, it is. I understand. I understand the kind of threat it has posed, and I understand why Kenyans are scared. It is because if we had the best of medical services, that can be understood if not condoned.
But even the countries with the best facilities are a bit concerned.
And if you look at a country like Japan, you know, which you know, they are
Very
among the people who are very advanced. If they are able to take precautionary measures the way they've done, closing schools, I mean,
and even the thing that says it would be discriminatory to, you know, they decide that floods can't come into the country. I'm wondering, when the Japanese are closing their schools,
Correct.
is it that they're trying to offend the citizens?
You
No,
see,
it's because they're trying to,
the thing we should not allow again to play is to be pacified. Oh, it's nothing.
They're our friends.
China has not been able to deal with this scourge. China herself.
Itself,
So how are we supposed to? So I again, these words people are using, it's discriminatory. I don't. When you're cautious,
there's a way you can approach it that wouldn't be.
when you're cautious, you're cautious. It's not that you're saying they should be kept away. You're just being cautious to ensure that you preserve. I mean, you are able. Oh, of course, you are able to protect your people. You know, this has got nothing to do with discrimination or not.
Suleiman, I feel like you'd be better placed to explain to us the significance of the Hajj visas being cancelled at this point and what that points to in terms of the seriousness of this virus spreading.
Clearly, Hajj is one of the pillars of Islam. All Muslims, any Muslim who is capable of affording certain requirements, has that specific obligation to visit that sacred land and exercise the Hajj event. But clearly, looking at this specific incident whereby we have the coronavirus and following this, the government has started putting in certain measures. I think to Muslims, it's understandable. It's equally protecting the lives of the Muslim pilgrims. The Muslims who will be moving from Kenya, Tanzania, UAE, and all the other countries to Saudi, their lives are equally protected by that specific rule. Absolutely. Equally, let me add this. I had, following my brother's discussion here, we have had incidences of Kenyans lately. Whenever we spot a Chinese in Kitui or even Nairobi, people tense up. So I think that is quite, that's not necessary. That's not important. We have certain Chinese who are working on specific construction projects.
And have been here since before the break of this virus.
So the government should instill confidence in the people. Give the people an assurance that certain checks will be undertaken. And following that specific confidence that will be given to Kenyans, the locals will not panic at all. The other day, there was this WhatsApp text that was going around that certain Chinese from China were seen with masks walking around an estate. So parents are concerned that what will happen to our children.
It's typical of them actually to use masks.
But now it's more alarming now.
I think, the visuals are not right for someone who's not used to that. But if you understand the Chinese and how they are, they often don masks.
But even the Norwegian government has discussed or has explained that there was one incident of coronavirus infection that has been confirmed. And it was a Chinese who visited the country, who was quarantined for 14 days, who ended up, certain infectious symptoms ended up resurfacing. So as my sister rightly puts, these are even in as much as you quarantine a person for 14 days, it's not an absolute
guarantee that they're,
and it tends to mutate. This is what we're told by the scientists, because the original coronavirus the original virus, I don't want to get too technical with it, can be attributed to the H1N1. It caused SARS.
SARS.
As well.
In fact, from what I've heard, it's a kind of a SARS, but it's, it's
so
on a higher
even
degree.
China's difficulty to deal with it is given that this is a new strain that has not been, they haven't figured out exactly how to completely treat it. And so at this point, we're just managing symptoms.
And I think before we move from that topic, I'd like to point out the fact that at this point, this is the best opportune time to begin to rethink our, national disaster management systems. And I saw such a proposal in the BBI report, especially under the safety and security. And one of the things under the safety and security point of the, amongst the 9-point agenda of the BBI, I think that was the 10th point that was included.
Right.
Some of the safety and security risks that were being addressed in that particular report were that, how ready are we for extreme weather conditions? How ready are we for outbreaks of diseases that we are not aware of? For example, the previous Ebola and now the current coronavirus. How ready are we for even cybersecurity attacks as a country? Terrorism, ethnicity and security related issues, especially during elections. And one of the propositions was that there is need to have a harmonized and a comprehensive national disaster management strategy that is in line with not just that is at the national level, but also in line with the county and local disaster management programs. Because yesterday I saw a statement from, I think it's the health CEC of Machakos County, and at the final tail end of the discussion, of the statement, she said our officers are on red alert. And I was like, red alert with what kind of equipment and what kind of training, So, and right now, for example, we know that the Chinese nationals do not just live in Nairobi. They are scattered around and across the country because of some of the projects that they undertake, which are essentially supposed to, help the country grow in terms of infrastructure. But do we have harmonized disaster management strategies? And I saw the other proposition was that these disaster management strategies are supposed to be periodically evaluated, because nobody oversaw that such an incident, coronavirus, would come up. So if we truly had one in place, this would be the time to evaluate it and test and see what are the loopholes that we need to fix. So as a country, this is something we really need to look into, and this is the best time to now begin to think about such strategies.
And it's important to know that this virus broke out in December.
Correct.
So while we should
we've
be
had
cautious,
all the time.
but then we've had all the time. And I mean, if locusts, that's another example. I mean, if we're talking about disasters, then that is the easiest example of how ill prepared we are.
It is, Brenda, I just wanted to add something on that issue and to what my good friend here has said. There's also another key aspect of this whole thing is information, right? Now, if you look at now what we've been told late, is that the people who boarded this aircraft went through a series of testing. If that information had come early, and Kenya was able to disseminate that information even before the before the plane landed, I believe we would have been able to sort of. So there's the element of information which either came as a surprise to many Kenyans, because you have people who have said, and these are government officials at Jomo Kenyatta, who have said they only saw a southern China jet landing. And everybody went to panic.
It was suspended.
Exactly. So people went to panic. But isn't this something that was communicated earlier? Oh, by the way, there is a China airline that is coming. All the passengers in that aircraft have been tested and retested. And when they land here, we are also going to take, from our port health, we are going to ensure that everybody who comes out, it inspires confidence. Exactly, because also at the end of the day, I honestly don't want to believe that you have a government of China which, has, if you look at the Chinese Academy of Science, the amount of money that they spend on research, and I've been to the Wuhan laboratory. I've been to that laboratory last year in February. And if you look at the kind of resources that are given to just science and research, I know sooner or later we are going to find a cure. We are going to figure this out. That's given. But when information is available, people tend to listen, and also people tend to know what to do. So if the preparation, you saw, it's like at the airport when it landed, people are not prepared. But if it was met by medical vehicles, and you're seeing people taken, being sorted out.
So somewhere.
That in itself,
confidence that
in itself would have told you, hey, by the way, as much as we cannot be, a small world on our own, and even during the days of Ebola, the entire other continents really did not kick us away
with travel restrictions left, right, and center. So it is understandable that we would want that to happen. And of
so
course,
information is critical.
Information and just knowing how to handle the public. And when we are aware of how the measures that are being taken, then we wouldn't freak out every time we hear. Because at some point, to many, all they heard was 200 39 people from China
have landed. Exactly.
That is it.
You know, yeah. So
Yeah,
I think you're making a very good point. And as far as inspiring confidence is concerned, I'd like us to focus on this because this is a very big story that's been covered for weeks on end on the papers. When you listened to the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Rachel Omamo, and the way she seemed unsure, did it inspire confidence in you about how we are handling this? Because she was being asked about the people in the plane. She was like, I have no way of knowing about who has a fever or what. I mean, even the kind of communication, I mean...
I told you, you see, the reason why, to me, information is key. There are several things that are done before an aircraft takes off.
Yes.
There is a flight plan,
that
is filed. There is communication between, so many agencies. So, what information did you get from China before they came? Now, as part of IATA and World Health, these are matters that are sanctioned globally. So the information that you'd have gotten when that flight plan was filed should have been able to tell you the truth of the matter.
Right.
And that is what you should have disseminated to Kenyans. That's what I'm telling you. There was a place where information did not come out, and that is why Kenyans felt, what? Could we be, is this a serious threat? Like what you've just said. I mean, you've put it very clearly. All people know is that you had a plane that, boom, landed with, and now people, I hear people are scampering. People are running away.
In fact, the way the Cabinet Secretary yesterday responded to the questions wasn't so inspiring. It wasn't giving any confidence to Kenyans. She was just hobbling around telling us that some of the flights come from other countries, are on transit to, they pass through Nairobi to China, or from China heading to other countries, passing through JKIA. And I think the parliamentarians were quite concerned. This is one of the very fine decisions that they're making in terms of undertaking their role. But I think going forward, in the event the government, that's the executive, is not taking an action on this, the House can pass a resolution, maybe, to suspend certain operations that are ongoing in the interest of the people. The people of Kenya, and Article 1, one of the ways that they exercise their sovereignty is through their elected persons.
Right.
The House can pass a resolution calling on the government to suspend flight operations to and from China or to and from any other country, such as Iran, whereby coronavirus infections is quite huge. So I think as a country, we need to be serious on this. Parliament should not just leave it to the CS. They are equally an arm of the government. I think what is going to happen is, considering we have the three arms of government and we are now a litigious nation, you will see a petitioner going to the court to obtain the orders of mandamus, maybe to mandate the government to suspend certain flight operations, and that might be something that can be done, because these are right. The health of Kenyans is entrusted with the government of Kenya under the Constitution. So if the government is not taking it serious, there are other ways of enforcing the same. So I think what will happen next, either the House passes a resolution or the courts. So a Kenyan might petition the courts for an order of mandamus.
Okay, but as it is right now, we're told the government has put in place management processes that were recommended by the WHO. This is according to the CS.
Yes, I thought you were going to pass me by on this question. and for me, I'd want to take something that would sound like an alarmist approach. We are talking about a ministry that is very core to the affairs of this country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The manner in which this has been handled alone should make us raise our eyebrows as to what to expect in the future if something worse were to happen to us as a country. We've seen countries in the past that have been seriously hit by cyber attacks that have literally almost run down their entire countries. What were to happen, for example, and I'm not anticipating that Kenya was to experience a cyber attack, but if it were to happen, or if our borders were under threat and the country was under serious, diplomatic halt, or rather a diplomatic shutdown between Kenya and a neighboring country, how would we handle this? The same way in which the president was able to fire Mwangi Kiunjuri, and I think one of the things that I'm not calling for a firing, I am not calling for a firing, but I think this is the point where we need to really reflect about when a cabinet, when a president is doing a rotation of ministries, are we just doing it for the sake of keeping the same people in government and just changing hands from one ministry to the next, or do we actually consider the suitability of the people that that are being moved from the one ministry to the next.
Right.
Because I mean, this is not a small issue. And sorry to sound alarmist, but I'm just saying that at this point, we also need to question a lot in terms of suitabilities of persons who are holding cabinet secretary positions.
Right.
One of the main reasons that drove the president to actually fire Mwangi Kiunjuri was his decision to tell us that if you see a locust, something that looks like a locust, take a photograph and, you know, post it. You know, and I think such, you know, communication is very, very important,
Right.
you know, when you are telling us in the interest of the country, what kind of interest are we talking about? And the moment this virus, you know, the moment news of this virus came up, one of the things that that the CS would have done, which would have even cautioned her against this particular public ridicule, was she should have taken measures within her own department to give us timely updates, you know, timely flow of information. And I think sometimes, you know, when there's a tragedy in a country, whenever there's proper flow of information, you feel that there is some sensitivity. And sometimes it's not even an assurance
and you can even
that,
just act
you know,
based on the knowledge that
Of course.
you have.
exactly, and it even inspires the people to say, okay, you know what? And trust me, we as Kenyans, we are not very, we are not idealistic enough to think that our country is so equipped to handle such incidences. We understand that this is new; it's very new. It's a challenge that the country is facing, and I'm sure Kenyans are more than willing to collaborate with the government and even take measures themselves to protect themselves.
Even if
because
it's not holding those flights,
you get,
there's certain things that we
and it just exposes our country. I mean, it exposes our country to also international ridicule, because I'm sure other countries are watching as we are handling this in the manner in which we are.
Okay.
And Brother, apart from that, very quickly, apart from the information, you know, this is not the first time we are getting in such a quandrum. You remember the issue about sugar, where one CS said this, the other one said that. And before you could know, there was panic. What people do? People stayed away from a very you know, a commodity that is used in our household, every day. And what does that do? That really affects the economy of a nation. Now, as we talk about China, we also must be mindful that they are also our critical
allies.
And being a critical trading partner, there are things that we must also be seen to be doing that, first of all, that does not hurt our trade. Remember, I told you, and I repeat again, that I believe in the few weeks and probably months ahead, this will be sorted. Then what kind of relationship do you lead?
That's why I said, when you made the example of the Japanese people take the clothing, it's not that they hate their kids. It's just that they want to protect them. But at the end of the day, it's still maintained that this government loves us and it's doing everything for our good. So the same way we can do things to protect the citizenry without necessarily
and not only that,
diplomatic ties.
Japan, they are supposed to be hosting the Olympics 2020.
You know,
they are becoming as cautionary as possible. And you know what? You have other nations that have started coming out and saying, hey, we need to have just another location to start preparing. No, it's not that they hate Japan. I mean, or the Chinese, but you know, the UK are starting to look at, you know, can we host the meeting? So you know, it's
quite necessary to act with caution, but at the same time maintain those relations. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you right here. Michael will be guiding us through the next discussion. We'll be reviewing the biggest topics of the week. Do not go too far.